if you're from Iraq or Turkey or Afghanistan or Egypt or from Lebanon, then the ban wouldn't have been applying to you. The issue with your wife in Australia is specifically the country of where your wife is from and not the religion. Again, I don't know both of the witnesses. This is the first time we're meeting, first time I'm hearing your story. But I want to say thank you, and I think especially as we hear your personal stories, there's stuff that Chairman Barrett and our committees can work together on moving forward on the policy standpoint. So thank you for being here. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Minnesota.
Madam Chairwoman, might I have just 30 seconds to just comment on the Congressman's remarks?
Actually,
okay.
That's not in order. So
okay, sorry.
We will turn to the gentlelady from Minnesota.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Judge Arthur, Stephen Miller has repeatedly cited the Center for Immigration Studies to defend his policies. Is it fair to say that you and your organization have influence over the administration's immigration policies?
We are a think tank, so I like to think that we have influence over all policies, including policies of the United States government. Whether anything I write is anything that influences Stephen Miller, I can't tell you.
Thank you. You've said that all 3 reiterations of the Muslim ban are legally justifiable. Various courts have disagreed, usually based on the White House intent. When Donald Trump was running for president, he called for a complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. Surely we have to take the ban in that context. Surely adding North Korea and Venezuela was a cynical attempt to get around the plain truth that this was intended to be a Muslim ban. In my view, Trump's campaign promise to ban Muslims wasn't just empty words. There is a connection between that promise and the subsequent ban. Would you like to see a complete ban of Muslims entering this country?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
I concur with Thomas Jefferson when he said that...
I appreciate that.
Okay, no.
I have comments. Stephen Miller is quoted as saying that he'd be happy if not one more refugee stepped foot on American soil. He's been the architect of the family separation, gutting the asylum laws and the increased militarization of ICE and the Border Patrol. He's also attacked our system of highly skilled immigration. Donald Trump has called countries like the country I come from, Somalia, shithole countries, and has wondered out loud why we don't get fewer more people from places like Africa and Haiti, and why we shouldn't get more people from places like Norway. We can conclude that anything besides an ethno-nationalist project from what the White House is doing. They've told us what they want to see, which is for people from white countries to immigrate to the United States. Your organization, the Center for Immigration Studies, has recently published an article asking whether we as a country had forgotten 9/11. There are 2 members of Congress mentioned as part of evidence in that article, Rashida Tlaib and myself. The Southern Poverty Law Center has designated your organization as a hate group, citing your repeated circulation of white supremacist and anti-Semitic writers. The Washington Post has rebuked the research from your organization on terrorism and immigration, and CIS's defense of the Muslim ban. So I don't know how we should take your views and the views of your organization seriously, sir, instead of understanding them as a point of view of a fundamental anti-immigrant ideologies. When you were asked by my colleague Hank Johnson in March, you denied that John Tenton was the founder of CIS and said, quote, "If there is a founder of CIS, it was Otis Graham." In an obituary for Dr. Graham, James Banner credited him for making the environmental case for restricting immigration in 2 of his later books. There was a manifesto from the man who killed 22 people in El Paso last month. In the manifesto, he said that because of the looming environmental catastrophes, I quote, "The next logical step is to decrease the number of people in America who are using resources." This was his justification for the act of mass murder, apparently inspired by the ideas such as those espoused by Otis. I'm appalled by that. Everyone here should be appalled by that. And I hope that you and the founder of your organization are appalled by the fact that you inspire people who engage in such acts. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
Madam Chairman, may I respond in any way to that?
Actually, that's not an order either. So
Very good.
Just as with the Ms. Kira.
I'm
The
just
gentlelady.
point of order. So what's the rules of the committee if a member chooses to utilize their 5 minutes to destroy a witness? Are you saying the rules of the committee, or attempt to just slander someone who's in front of us?
Going on the record of the words that he used is not a destruction of a witness.
The
Point of order for the
gentlelady
chair.
will withhold. A point of order has been raised. Ordinarily, this is a time where members may ask 5 minutes of the witnesses. It is not a time for the witnesses to give speeches, and we will now recognize.
What's the ruling? So I'm just wondering what's the rules of the committee if a member chooses to spend their 5 minutes slandering a witness in their organization? What is the rules of the committee as to whether or not the person who gets slandered is allowed to respond?
Well,
If the facts are on the record,
the
there's no
gentlelady will
slander.
suspend, and Mr. Zeldin will suspend as well. The rules of the committee provide that under the 5-minute rule, members may question or make statements. It is not a time for witnesses to make speeches. We will now recognize
Point of order / parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Biggs. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the past, in this committee, it's been my observation that on occasion, when someone has not to engage in debate with the witness per se, but actually has maligned their character and accused them and accosted them or their organization, we've had the courtesy to let them briefly respond to that. I know because I've seen it actually happen, and I'm wondering, I guess my parliamentary inquiry is, since that's been become, if you will, the established practice, if someone has been maligned or their organization, is it not the practice and precedent of this committee, which is consistent with the rules of the House, to allow that person to briefly respond?
Well, actually not, but to avoid a prolonged discussion on this point, I will ask Mr. Arthur in under 30 seconds, if you may, to please make a concise statement, and we will then hear from the next member who wishes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't attach myself to any of those statements. I certainly don't. I decry any individual who is, misled, any misguided individual who takes action for any reason. I write about the rules that have been passed by the Congress of the United States and ask that those be enforced. And I always note the fact that Congress is free to change the laws of the United States, sworn to uphold those laws, and I will continue to do so. I'm a father, I'm a member of the community, and I appreciate the opportunity to respond to those statements.
Gentleman's time has expired. We will now turn to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I too want to thank Dr. Denzagi and Mr. Agi Gosling. See, I did that right. Sometimes I'm still called Garza instead of Garcia, so I know the feeling. I just want to say that, and I'm going to read straight out of the Ninth Circuit. I mean, they called this ban, and I'm going to call it a ban because I think we should call it what it is. It was ill-conceived, poorly implemented, and ill-explained. I don't think I've heard anything differently today that convinces me otherwise, and I want to thank you both for coming and having the courage to come share your stories, because I think your story is the same as many that we saw all over the country, all over the world during that time period. And while I do, Madam Chair, I have another question. I want to yield about a minute of my time to my colleague from Minnesota, Ms. Omar, for a brief response, and then she'll yield back.
I object to any notion that my stating of facts is a malignment of the character of the witness. Thank you for distancing yourself from the actions of the person who committed that atrocity, which is what I also said. I want to make sure that people understand I did not make a single statement that was not factual in my remarks. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I wanted to ask both of our